I mean, just to start us off, I mean, we can get right into it. And something with what Theo was saying, and I kind of want to play that card as well, is I don't want to play the victim card in any of this. I want to talk about a bit of my experiences, but I don't want to make this all about me and make myself the main character of this whole thing. But I guess with trauma, it's such a, I guess, growing phenomenon in the recent years and the past decade. And what does trauma mean to you, and how would you explain it to someone in layman terms that would just ask you right off the rip, what is trauma and what does it entail?
Yeah, that's such an important question, and it's such a challenging question to answer. And partly because I think within our culture, we've developed a definition for trauma that's only partly right. It's only partly contains trauma. And so the definition our culture's developed would be what I call big T trauma. So it's something horrific happening to you, something out of the normal that's hurts you badly that happens to you. And that definitely is trauma. The problem is that only happens to a small percentage of the population. The key element is it's a danger that you can't resolve. So that can happen with what we call little T trauma, which is happened in over 75% of the population. And that is when a child, to them, a danger they can't resolve is when they're neglected. So they're not getting the support they need. They're not getting their needs met the way they should be, but they're not able to meet those needs themselves, or they don't have the tools to deal with some of the life stuff. And so as a result, they feel, I'm going to fail. Something bad's going to happen. Must be my fault that my parents are too busy for me. I feel all alone. And all of a sudden their world starts to feel unsafe. Meanwhile, they just got neglected. And so big T trauma is something bad from the outside happening to you. Little T trauma is something good that should have happened to you that didn't happen.
Right.
So it's a trauma of, it didn't even happen to you. So how can that be trauma? Well, something good that should have happened. And so it's that almost invisible type of trauma, but it still causes the child to feel alone and up against a bad world without tools. And that's a scary place. So it's still unresolved problems and danger for them.
Right.
And so the majority of trauma is little T trauma. And it has the exact same effect on the brain and the development as big T trauma. And so I get so many people that say to me, I don't have trauma. And they're thinking big T trauma. But when I begin to explore it with them, they go, oh, yeah, okay, I got trauma.
Yeah,
I never saw that before.
Exactly. And does it start, so with little T trauma, does it start with the parents' neglect, and then does it branch off into different things such as, acceptance from peers or,
right.
Other things?
Right. Yeah. So the majority of little T trauma, which then so complex trauma is when danger is happening all the time. So it's ongoing. So now you're living in an environment where this is just not a one-time event anymore. This is a daily event. So now your whole nervous system is constantly dealing with this danger. That's the issue with complex trauma. So that usually begins in the home where either mom or dad, for whatever reasons, aren't meeting your needs consistently, especially your emotional needs. They might be there for you physically, but they're not there for you emotionally, nurturing you, comforting you, hearing you, seeing you, accepting you, all of that. But it's not restricted to just mom and dad. So you can get complex trauma from your siblings. You get a big brother that's always teasing you, picking on you, making fun of you. That creates an ongoing danger environment. And if mom and dad aren't stepping in to resolve it, you're too little to step in and resolve it. Right. Then it can go outside of the family to your community. So now you get a bully at school, you get a teacher at school that doesn't like you. You could be black kid in a white neighborhood, and all of a sudden your neighborhood there's a lot of prejudice here. This is not safe. And so it's not safe to go outside and play too much. So it now goes to the kind of community. Then you go to church and you get a youth leader that sexually abuses you. That's not safe either. So it's anybody that's more powerful than you that does something that violates you or doesn't meet your needs. And so that can happen home, siblings, community. Then it can even go into, you're in a war-torn country. You're in a country that's just super repressive.
Right.
That women are not safe. All of those kind of things begin to happen. So complex trauma point can take place in any venue possible. It just primarily takes place when a child is small within the home.
Right. And it's something
it doesn't have to be parents who intentionally inflict it. It could be very well-meaning parents who are doing the best they can based on the information they were giving, but it's not meeting their child where they're at and helping their child, and the child is getting hurt and not feeling loved.
Right. And I was going to ask you about that. I mean, a lot of times I think it doesn't need to be directly where the parents or whoever is intentionally and directly neglecting a child. It could be mom and dad disputes and arguments, and the child happens to be in that environment and sees the conflict and the fighting and the yelling, and that in itself is complex trauma because it's indirectly affecting the child, because it doesn't need to be directly where, you know, I'm neglecting the child, I'm not talking to you, I'm not showing you love. It could be between the parents, and the child just happens to be in that environment.
Exactly. So if I could just kind of break that into two pieces for you. So the one that you're talking about is danger in my external environment. So bad things happening, abuse, etc. But the second is, so a child to feel safe and secure needs a safe external environment, but more importantly, they need to be able to connect to somebody who is safe. And so a child is attuned to their external environment, but they're more attuned to mom and dad's emotional state. And so if dad's always angry, then dad's not safe to connect with. If mom's always depressed or full of anxiety and worry, then mom's not safe to connect with. And so a child's emotional world is actually shaped more by their parents' emotional world than anything else. And so if their parents aren't safe, their emotional world is not regulated, is not safe, then the child doesn't feel safe. And so all of a sudden the parent could be high performing on the job, could be looking great in society, but there's tension in the house all the time. There's undercurrents of anger all the time. Mom's always fear-based in everything she does. That's affecting the child deeply and creating complex trauma.
Wow. Okay. And regardless of the mother or the father actively telling the child, hey, I love you, you're the best, giving all that affection and love, that doesn't even matter at that point when the child sees the mom or dad in a constant state of anxiety and conflict and stress. It doesn't even matter at that point when...
Exactly.
Wow.
Because then words actually become meaningless. They're not basing their sense of reality on words, they're basing it on what they sense. And that's being determined and formed by mom and dad's internal world.
Wow.
And if I can add one other piece to this, Alex, would be this. So I grew up in a world where mom and dad were quite emotionally in a good place, but they were parenting me based on how they were taught to parent. And so that basically was, children are to be seen, not heard. Children are to obey and conform. It doesn't matter so much what the children's emotional needs are. Take care of their physical needs and make them obey you. So you need lots of discipline. You don't need to spend time nurturing the child, getting to know the child, doing all of that. You need to be preparing responsible citizens. And so you got to be kind of hard-nosed. You got to be quite strict and disciplined. And then what came out of that as well was my parents' strong work ethic and a strong commitment to love other people. Love, love, love. But what that meant is if you ever relaxed and took care of yourself, you're being lazy or selfish. And to love people all the time meant you had to always sacrifice your needs. Your needs didn't matter. Always giving, 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 never taking care of yourself. And so basically that set me up to burn myself out and create a world that wasn't safe for me because I couldn't say no. I always was work, work, work. And I created a very unsafe environment for myself. Now you look at that, what were my parents doing? Giving me the best teaching they had, but it was some bad teaching. And it created an environment that wasn't safe.
Right.
Meanwhile, wonderful people in many ways, but some bad teaching.
It's very interesting that you say that because, you know, not to bring it back to myself, play the victim card, but I grew up with my mom, my auntie, and my uncle and my grandma. I never had a father figure. I mean, my uncle was a bit of a father figure for me, but it's interesting because this is there's a lot of relief with this for me, is because for the longest time, you know, like you said, I always downplayed my trauma. I never thought I had any trauma growing up. I always tell people I had a great childhood. I had a very peaceful childhood compared to other people, you know, like if I was to compare myself, you know, I always used to compare it to someone that, you know, saw their friend get shot in front of them, or saw, you know, their mom get abused and physically abused by their father, or someone that was sexually assaulted as a child. I never went through that, so I used to always downplay my own trauma and say, well, I didn't have it as bad as this person or that person, or I shouldn't be feeling this way. But thinking back on it now, and like what you said, my nervous system, and regardless of what the situation is, Tim, would you say that no matter what it is, it could be a parent telling the child, no, you're not allowed to have candy right now, and the child's nervous system gets activated, would you say that is a little piece of trauma? Because a lot of people undermine their trauma and what they've been through, right? Because they say, well, oh, my mom yelling at me for having candy at a time where I wasn't supposed to have candy, that gave me anxiety, that activated my nervous system, and I felt my heart rate raise. But that's nothing compared to someone that saw their child, that saw their friend get shot. Like, would you say it's okay to accept that as the same type of trauma? I don't, if that makes any sense.
So before I answer that part, if I can answer kind of your example first. So to me, every child needs boundaries, but they need those boundaries to be enforced in a loving, respectful way. So telling a child you can't have candy right now because you're going to have supper in a few minutes, that's a good boundary. So that's not the problem. That's not going to cause trauma. The child might be annoyed and upset, but you can resolve that. What caused the trauma was mom flipping out, mom being triggered, mom becoming emotionally dysregulated. So now with mom emotionally dysregulated, that's the panic. My rock now is no longer my rock. My rock now is an unsafe person who's lashing out at me. And so now I become dysregulated. That's the trauma. To take that further, back to your bigger question. So what basically complex trauma is pain that a child can't resolve. So your need is not met, you get hurt, somebody's not there for you, so you're feeling rejection, you're feeling abandoned, you're feeling disrespected, you're feeling unloved. So you get painful emotion piled on painful emotion that you can't resolve. So normally in a healthy family, if a need's not being met and the child cries, the parents come in and figure out what the need is, meet the need, and it's resolved, and the child's happy again. What happens in complex trauma, because the child's neglected or abused, they have a need, they cry, they either get punished or ignored for crying, but they don't have tools to resolve it. So it just starts piling up. Well, that means to a child, I got to live with constant pain that is gradually increasing. Well, who wants to live with that? So the brain goes to a survival skill, which is either deny or minimize the pain. That'll make it feel less. So how do you get feeling less pain? Or deny that you have any pain, or minimize it. Well, I'm not as bad as others. At least I don't have that happen to me. The problem is we're no longer validating our pain. We're actually developing a system that's keeping the pain alive because we never get honest about it. We're always lying about how bad our pain is. And so the first thing that happens for so many people when they start learning about trauma is they do exactly what you say. Well, I don't have trauma. Oh, yeah, I had little things that happened. They're not that bad. It's not like my dad sexually abused me or something. So we're minimizing it again. And you can't heal from trauma until you see it accurately, till you validate it. But what's so important to realize, because people go, well, why do I need to go there? And it's this: as long as I don't validate it, it's still affecting me negatively. And so it might seem like it was some little thing, but to that child at that time, it feels like I'm a nobody, I don't matter. I'm a zero. It feels like I'm abandoned. It feels like I'm rejected. That does tremendous damage on the nervous system, on your self-concept. That adds stress to your nervous system, which can now get triggered today in relationships all the time. And so when we talk about little t trauma, it doesn't mean it's insignificant. It's just as significant as big T trauma on the nervous system.
Right. Wow. That is so, it's just so reassuring hearing that. And I wanted to segue into this as well. And what's typically the first, I guess, symptoms of little T trauma you see in someone starting high school and even after high school? Is there, for me, from what I remember, and this is just an example because it's just part of my experience, my lived experience, is that I had a lot of turmoil and a lot of family conflict within my own household. So I tried to seek comfort and validation from others outside, from my my elementary school, from high school, and I wasn't receiving that either. And I think it's led to me to this point today where I'm in a constant state of people pleasing and seeking validation. Is that sort of the pattern you see with a lot of people that have gone through little T trauma? And what are the first signs of it and the different types of symptoms?
So if I can do a huge kind of preamble to answer this question. So when you look at a child coming into the world, there's two kind of huge drives that they have. So number one is to attach. So I need to attach to somebody safe who loves me, who will meet my needs because I'm too little to meet my own needs. So the only way a little child can survive is to connect or attach to somebody safe. So the first thing destroyed in complex trauma is a child's trying to attach to somebody who's unsafe. They're either too busy neglecting them, or they're neglectful, or they're angry, they're violent, whatever. So attachment is broken. So what comes out of that? The child concludes it must be my fault. I must not be good enough. I can't trust people, so trust is destroyed. The second thing that comes out of that is authenticity. A child is driven to be authentic. I'm the real me. That you see what you get. This is who I am. But if I can't attach to you and I think I'm the problem, then I conclude being authentic is what led to people rejecting me. So I can't be authentic anymore. I now have to be fake. I now have to be something other than my true self if people are going to love me and respect me and accept me. So now I'm going to wear a mask, I'll be a chameleon, whatever. So authenticity and connection or attachment are these two drives that get disrupted, okay? So a child can't resolve it. They try to change and be different. So the brain then has to go to fight, flight. So a child gets really angry. And, well, they're too little. they get punished for being angry. So they then go to flight. I'm going to try to run away from home. I'm going to be invisible. I'm going to avoid. But they're too little to run away from home. So fight and flight aren't working really well. But many will come back to that later in life. They'll just become super angry, or they'll just avoid everything and become invisible. But for a child, many have to go to freeze. I'm just going to shut down feelings. I'm going to shut down my whole internal world and just be busy all the time. Constant video games, constant distractions, constant being with friends. So I'm go. That way I don't have to feel, that way I don't have to live in my own skin, basically. But for many, they still have to live with their parents. So they go to the fourth F, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I still need these people that aren't meeting my needs to somehow meet my needs. So now I'm going to be a people pleaser. Now I'm going to become a perfectionist. I'll do everything perfectly. Now I'm going to become super responsible. Now I'm going to conform to whatever they expect of me. So they're now subject to peer pressure. I don't feel I fit in here, but I need to fit in somewhere. So now I'm going to fit in with my peer group, and I'll use my fawning skills to fit in. I'll be whatever the group needs me to be. So a child does all of these different fawning things. So I look for like the peer pressure, unable to say no, unable to set boundaries, don't trust anybody, want intimacy, but are afraid of true intimacy. So everything's kind of fake intimacy, wearing masks all the time. But then a child is, how do I get my needs met? Well, I either have to learn how to manipulate people, because I can't come right out and ask. That would put myself out there and I might get rejected. So I'll learn to manipulate, or I'll learn to kind of control people, how to get power over people, how to play people. All of those things become part of your toolkit to survive. And that's what you usually see kind of early on in your teen years. But then there's always the need to kind of medicate this pain that's always there. So I shove it down. I deny that it's there. I always need a distraction, or I then find drugs and alcohol and I go, oh, I just found the perfect solution to all this internal emptiness, and it makes me feel good. It makes me feel connected. All of that, perfect solution. Or some fall into kind of, I just need to be in love. I just need a girlfriend. I just need a relationship to feel like I'm lovable. And so they just can't be alone, unattached. They have to be in a relationship. Right. So I don't know if that's answering it, but those are some of the early ones I look for.
Yeah, and leading, into adulthood, early 20s, mid 20s, do you see a lot of people, like, do people take a different route? So the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, do you see people tend to pick a lane in the way they deal with their trauma? Because, speaking with the people around me, I know people that have a flight tendency where they're very avoidant when something does happen, and they become very quiet and kind of very distant. And we always say, oh, okay, so and so is being distant, they're going through something, or someone gets really angry. Or for me personally, I get very anxious, and there's a lot of I guess fawning with me in
insecurity.
Insecurity. And I because I work with a therapist too, and he was actually saying it's funny that I have a podcast now, because it's directly correlated to the fact that I was in a place where I wasn't being seen enough, or I wasn't being accepted, or I'm not I'm not as cool as the other person. So now it would make sense that I have a podcast now. And do you see, individuals in their, when they get to their 20s and 30s and 40s, sort of have a tendency of which way they're going, what lane they're using for the 4 Fs?
Yeah, I would say yes and no. I need to qualify it. So most will develop kind of a predominant coping style, but the qualification is it can change depending on the relationship they're in. So they can be a very people pleaser, but then they get a girlfriend, and all of a sudden they're this angry, controlling fight person who's got to be right all the time, got to be respected all the time, and if they're not, they're angry. And well, that's not a people pleasing. And so it really depends on the relationship and how powerful they feel in that relationship as to which coping style they go to on that given day. And so what you realize is they could end up with 50 different subtle coping styles because they have 50 different relationships.
Wow, right.
That each one requires a slightly different way. Whereas if they're with kind of similar people all the time, you just see kind of one main coping style. So to take that just a different perspective would be this. You'll see a main coping style in kind of acquaintance, casual friends, but a different coping style with intimate.
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Because it's a completely different dynamic with
Exactly.
intimate relationship. Right. Wow.
Exactly.
And that actually brings me to my next one, because this is something I've been wondering: is can a very traumatic event such as a really toxic relationship and breakup completely throw someone into a whirlwind of how they were before that, through their childhood, elementary, the little T traumas they've been through, and then let's say at the age of 21 they go through something so traumatic with a relationship that it completely flips their perspective and their paradigm on how they see the world? Like it doesn't have to be, can you develop a different type of perspective and get thrown into a different space later on in life? It doesn't have to be at a childhood level, if that makes sense.
Right.
Can someone change completely?
Yep. What I would say with that is that probably a lot of initial stuff happened in childhood that they outgrew for a while, but they hadn't really dealt with the root issues. So let me see if I can explain it this way. We kind of live, every culture, you just grew up, there's certain norms of behavior that are acceptable and aren't acceptable. So if you grew up with neglect and you developed kind of adaptations of lying, people pleasing, anger, a lot of those are condemned by society. That's not good. So you can learn now, I got to conform to kind of a bigger standard than just what I did in the home. And you can change as long as life's not too stressful. You can fit these new roles. You're good at that. And so you can go for years where you're this honest person, responsible person, very giving, kind person, all of that. And you go, wow, I don't have any trauma. I'm a really healthy person. Then you get a relationship that just falls apart and self-destructs, and you're in a world of pain. And what does your brain do? It goes back to those earliest childhood coping tools of anger, all the fight, flight, freeze, fawn type of things, because that's its most reliable tools from the past.
Right.
You learned some other tools cognitively that you did for years, but there was no stress in those years that was too severe. But as soon as stress got beyond what those tools could handle, you went back to the earlier tools for great stress. And it's like your personality went backwards, and people go, whoa, what was that about? And so the danger of that is for people to go, my trauma began when the relationship broke up. And I go, that was definitely trauma. But what it probably did was expose that you had earlier trauma you never dealt with, that gave you a set of tools that you now fell back on.
Right.
And so it's really realizing that you were put to a brand new stress level that caused your brain to have to go to the tools for that stress level. And the only tools it had available were the ones from early childhood.
Right. Are you essentially saying that the traumatic event of, example, a terrible relationship that self-destructs and you're in a world of pain, it doesn't substitute the trauma that you've had growing up as a child, but it just adds on to it. It adds another layer to it that you need to unpack. It doesn't completely substitute the trauma you had before.
Exactly. Right. So for most of the people that I work with that come to me for help, they would come because the relationship self-destructed and they're in a world of pain. So they've got present day trauma. And that definitely they need help with that. They need tools, they need healing with that. There's no denying that. But what I want them to realize is that that breakup could have happened to somebody quite healthy and they'd still be coping in very healthy ways. But that breakup happened to you and you're coping in very unhealthy ways. Why are you coping in unhealthy ways? Probably because your brain's gone to some earlier tools that were unhealthy. So that would point to another layer of trauma. That's from way long time ago that we probably need to do some work there too. So now in helping you, we got to work on two levels, present day and past traumas, and see the toolkits that they're both in common with that. So let me put it another way that I hope helps. One of the challenges to me with complex trauma is a child is trying to get their needs met, to get love, all of that, in a home where they're being abused or neglected. And it could be parents intentionally or unintentionally do that. But the child then adapts. So if I do more chores, if I get straight A's, if I am a great athlete, if I'm super responsible, then maybe I won't get hurt and maybe my needs will get met. So to them, the adaptation often seems to work. And they go, that was a really good adaptation. But then they get to adult life. So this is 20, 30, 40 years later. And all of a sudden, they're people pleasing, their manipulation, they're getting burnt out, their relationships aren't working, their partner's frustrated with them, and their relationship falls apart. And they go, how come my life's not working? And they start coping in all these unhealthy ways. And what you have to realize is complex trauma sets up adaptations in a child to survive. And you don't see that they're maladaptations to 20 to 40 years later. Wow. When life doesn't work and relationships don't work. Right. And all of a sudden you go, oh, that adaptation that seemed to be such a good idea, now I don't trust anybody, now I'm dishonest, now I wear masks all the time, now I people please all the time. Wow, that's making healthy life and healthy relationships impossible today. And so we want to focus on it was that bad relationship when really, no, it was 40 years ago when I learned to adapt the way I did that I've fallen back onto.
Right. And is it ever a time where, for example, again, being in a really terrible, toxic relationship where the person is constantly trying to please the significant other all the time, and then it ends terribly. Can that experience actually be a positive thing where after that experience there's just a bit of exhaustion where they're just done people pleasing because it took so much out of them, where their nervous system is just at a complete deflation, where it's like, I'm done. I can't imagine putting myself through something where I'm people pleasing someone, or I'm trying to seek validation, or I'm trying to gain this approval from someone, because I just went through an absolute nightmare with this person, and I physically do not have the energy to do this anymore. Like, is that would you in a way, is that a positive, or is that not a healthy way of thinking about it, coping with it?
I would say there's potentially a healthy and an unhealthy in that. So I need to again qualify it, because what happens to a lot of people, so the relationship breaks up and they go, why? And they diagnose their own relationship and they go, well, because I was the one always giving up my needs. I was the one always sacrificing and people pleasing. So that's the problem. I'm a people pleaser. I never set boundaries. I never say no. Okay, I'm going to fix that. And so what they do is like a pendulum swinging. They go to the other extreme. I'm not going to please anybody. I'm going to say no to everybody. Well, that's not really the problem. That was a symptom of deeper problems. So to just get focused on the symptom can actually just cause a pendulum swing, which makes the next relationship fail just for different reasons, because now you never give in, you never accommodate anybody's needs or compromise. You just have gone the other extreme. So to me, what's important is this. If a person realizes all those adaptations that I had as a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, where I became a people pleaser, where I gave up all my needs, where I was more attuned to everybody else's needs than my own needs, where I never said no to anybody, where I was afraid of conflict, where I never stood up for myself. And basically I felt if anybody saw the real me, they would reject me. So I had to keep doing this so people would like me. That's the real problem. So what's happened today, thankfully, because of this all falling apart and I'm in a world of pain, is I go, this has given me the incentive to finally look at my childhood. This has given me the incentive to finally work on those deep wounds that I've never dealt with before. Then it's a positive. But if it only causes me to swing the pendulum and become more of a jerk the other direction,
Right.
then that's not going to be a good thing. That's only going to create more problems.
Right. And
but to me, most people don't change adaptations, which really are maladaptations. They don't change them until there's enough pain in their life to get them to stop and go, these aren't working anymore. And then that's where the pain is actually a good thing. If it pushes me to be willing to look at myself and change and develop healthy ways of coping.
Right.
Then it's a positive.
Absolutely.
And most people need some pain to be willing to change.
Wow. That's so beautifully put. And the pendulum swing, would you say it's also not a sustainable thing, because
Exactly.
naturally you'll go back to the deep rooted.
Yeah, and what I've seen with so many people is they go from being a people pleaser to I'm not pleasing anybody, and then everybody just cuts them out of their life because you're a jerk, and then they're so lonely again, they swing back to being a people pleaser again. And so basically, they only know 2 sets of tools in relationships. Give up all your needs and be a people pleaser, or be a narcissist. That's all they know. They don't know what healthy is, so they just swing back and forth and wonder why they never have relationships that work.
And if they don't look at their inner child and their trauma as a child, they're just going to keep being swung back and forth with with each relationship.
Exactly.
And but more so, it's going to be the same type of relationship because for me, like, I just want to kind of talk about this a little bit. Is I'm 28 and I'm starting to realize, and I'm seeing this now, that I'm more drawn to toxicity and to someone that gives me confusion. It's a bit of it's something that I've been working on, and I've been trying to unpack for the last few years, and it's something that I'm aware of it. I am aware of it, and I am aware of my trauma, and I've validated it, but I still can't do. There's something still holding me back. What is that thing that holds people back even after they understand their trauma? Even though I can sit here and tell you, yes, I'm drawn to women that make me confused and make me question myself and make me not feel good about myself, honestly. Like I don't understand. It's like I'm addicted to the chaos.
Right. Yep. So, such a good question. Let me kind of come at it from two angles for you.
Absolutely.
So, the first is, so complex trauma, most of it happens to a child from infancy, from birth, pre-verbal, before they even have words. So the brain is responding to it when it can't put it into words, when it can't even describe the emotions. So it's at a very subconscious place that it's trying to solve this. And so that's the key, is it's subconscious. But what's happening with that is there's a template being formed of what normal is. That's beginning to form from birth on. So here's what relationships are like. This is what normal is like in relationships. And so you get comfortable with that. That, begin to learn how to handle. You get the tools for it. You actually begin to feel okay with that. And then when you leave that, and then you're in healthier relationships, but then you meet somebody that matches that toxic template, your brain goes, oh, this feels so right. And so now you are attracted to people that match your childhood template.
Wow.
All subconsciously. You're not even aware of it because that was your normal. That feels normal. And so if you grew up with narcissists, you grew up with abuse, you grew up with emotionally unavailable people, as soon as you meet them again, something in you is attracted to that. Take that a little bit further. What happens when your normal is unhealthy, but it's still your normal? It feels right. It begins to feel actually safe because you kind of know what to do there. If you go to a new normal that's healthy, it actually feels wrong. It feels weird. It feels uncomfortable. I don't know what to do here. I want to get back to where I know how to handle. And so we're drawn back to what feels normal and what feels good that we know how to handle. Safe people actually feel unsafe because they don't know what to do up here. So our brain has created a system that keeps us imprisoned to danger because it feels normal.
Right.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, for many children in complex trauma, they actually had to parent their parents. Their parents were kind of either busy all the time, mental health issues, angry all the time, emotionally dysregulated. And the child had to, if they wanted to feel safe, they had to take care of dad's emotions, mom's emotions. They had to meet their needs, but neglect their own needs. So they became very attuned to mom and dad's emotional needs, mom and dad's physical needs, and they were very good at sacrificing in order to take care of them. So they kind of became the parents to their parent. In some families, they actually got validated for that. You are such a good child. You are so responsible. You take care of mommy so well. All of those things happen. They weren't getting validation from anything else. Nobody was meeting their needs. Nobody was there for them. Oh, validation. Wow, feels great. So now actually I am drawn to people in crisis, and I'm going to fix them and help them and take care of them because I'll get validation. And I'm longing for the validation, which means I'm actually longing for some crisis. So I'm drawn to disaster, because then that's how I'm going to get the validation I need. And so that's what happens for many people, is it's their path. The only validation they know how to get is to rescue and help somebody. So they need people in crisis or chaos or drama.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. The way you explain it, it makes complete sense.
Good.
I don't think anyone else would be able to explain that in a simpler way, honestly. And is there a way to change that? Like, is there a way for someone to change years of subconscious, this is what they're used to, and forcefully change that? Is there?
There is, but I think the key thing to understand up front is there's not a magic switch that you can flip and change it overnight. Whenever you're trying to become aware of the subconscious, how do you become aware of something you're not aware of? Usually you need somebody else to put words to it, like I just did. And then you go, oh yeah, oh, okay. Now I'm becoming aware of something that was in my subconscious. But you're only really partially aware of it. It's going to take time to become more and more aware of, oh, that showed up there. Oh, that showed up again. Oh, I never saw that there before. Wow, my fear of abandonment, my need for validation through chaos. Wow, and you just start getting greater and greater awareness of it. So that takes time, number one. But then secondly, the thing to realize is all of trauma happens in the child's brain, which is the limbic brain, which is the emotion part of the brain, survival part of the brain. And its main concern when it is feeling a negative emotion is I want to get rid of it now. I want to feel good now. I want instant gratification. That's why drugs seem to be such a good solution. They take me out of pain, give me instant gratification. So today, if my limbic brain gets triggered with a negative emotion, guess where it wants to go? Take it away now. I don't care about healthy tools. I want to feel good now. I don't want to sit in this negative emotion. And so what happens as soon as you're in kind of relationship pain, all of a sudden it's like, I'm going to do something crazy to feel good because I don't want to have to deal with this in ways that are going to help me over a period of time get healthier and feel good long term. And so you're really dealing with a limbic brain that wants instant gratification and having to get into your cortex and say, we're going to sit in this discomfort and choose to do what is healthy. So when I meet somebody and I feel an instant attraction to them, my limbic brain is fired up saying, oh, I love the feeling of intensity. I love the feeling of being needed. I love the feelings of all of that connection that I feel, the chemistry with that person. Resist your limbic brain, get into your cortex, build this relation very gradually. Have boundaries, stand up for yourself. And you go, where's the fun in that? Where's the intensity in that? Right. I got to resist a powerful monster that wants to get fed now because I just awakened it. That is really hard to do. And so this is a really slow process of resisting that limbic brain when it gets triggered, getting back into the cortex and doing what I know is healthy, even though I don't feel like doing it.
Right.
But that's what is necessary. And as I do that enough, it gets easier and easier, and my limbic brain gets less powerful over time.
Right. So seeing that person and resisting the fact that, and telling yourself, I can see that this person is not good for me. This person is going to put me through a world of pain, and it's going to be a nightmare. Like I can see the writings on the wall for this to be a disaster, and really fight that. Because it's intriguing, it's exciting,
oh yeah,
you know. And
so what's so important to understand about complex trauma is the 4 chemicals the brain is supposed to have to feel good. So oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins don't happen when you don't have connection and you're in fear. So your brain doesn't have the feel good chemicals it was designed to have. Rather, the brain then goes to substitute chemicals. Can I get dopamine or serotonin through a chemical or through an activity? Since I can't get it through connection. And you can, but they don't last. You need bigger and bigger fixes to try to get the same thing. But the brain also, it does other chemicals. It gives you cortisol, which is adrenaline. It gives you a rush. Anger gives you adrenaline and cortisol, which medicates the feelings, takes the pain away, gives you a sense of life and energy. Chaos and stress give you that. So now I'm an adrenaline junkie. And it doesn't make me feel fully alive, but it makes me feel somewhat alive, and that's better than nothing. Absolutely. And so all of a sudden, I'm chasing unhealthy chemicals because I can't get the real healthy chemicals. And one of the chemicals that is a healthy one, which is oxytocin, is also a chemical that is part of the trauma response. So when a child is traumatized, they get cortisol in the brain, which gives them adrenaline, which is energy to fight or flight. But they also get oxytocin, which is you're too little to fight or flight, so you need to run to mommy or daddy. And so when mom and dad see their child crying or in danger, they get oxytocin, which means I need to hug my child, I need to love my child, I need to protect my child. So that desire for connection keeps a child safe. And it's released in big doses when danger is happening. But what happens to many children with complex trauma is they run to mom and dad are too busy, or mom and dad are angry and say, grow up, quit being such a baby. And oxytocin doesn't lead to comfort and help. It leads to more pain. So they shut it down. But then they hit their teenage years and they fall in love. And that releases oxytocin. And they go, this is such a good chemical. I love oxytocin. I now want to be an oxytocin junkie. So they chase oxytocin in relationships, through sex, through relationships, wanting that good feeling, but there's still not healthy connection of true emotional intimacy. And so again, complex trauma sets up all these chasing the wrong chemicals through the wrong means, but they seem to be working. And it's not until later in life where you realize this is making me an addict. This is causing me to be a sex addict, a relationship addict, a drug addict. It's not really creating joy. It's creating pleasure, but not joy.
Yeah.
And it takes a few hard knocks before people start realizing that.
Oh my goodness. Because, and I want to tell you this, I want to be completely honest. I, about a year ago, told my friend, I told him life is too calm and mundane right now. And this was when I wasn't really putting myself out there to meet, someone and find a partner and be in a relationship or anything intimate. And I remember vividly, I specifically remember him telling this, I want something that's gonna throw me into a whirlwind. I need excitement. Like I need to meet someone that's gonna be toxic to me, so then I can have that hit of that dopamine or the oxytocin, and then the grieving process after, the anger that's gonna come with that. I want that anger. I want that feeling of that power. And like I was telling Alex, I was telling you this before, Alex. It's like the way I would explain it, because I actually went through something like that where I was in this situation, and the grieving process after, I became so angry, and I tell people it's as if the cartoon character Venom took over me. It's like this evil darkness, but this just so powerful, and it almost grounded me. And I remember telling people, life feels too calm for my liking right now, and I need something or someone to flip me upside down so I can just get that rush. And it's terrible. And I want to ask you, because this is it makes everything so clear now, and everything makes complete sense to what I did and how I feel. Because when I was in that state of being very calm and not a lot of things going on, how can someone find joy and the same amount of fulfillment and groundedness in that? Because it's so hard. Is it just a matter of taking these constant knocks and these different nightmares to go through to at some point just say, I'm done with it? I'd rather be in a state of mundanity rather than go through another nightmare. does it just have to come to that, or is there a way to fully embrace the casual and the calm, if that makes any sense?
Oh, definitely. And it's such an important question, Mo. And I would say, to me, again, it doesn't happen overnight. This is going to be a gradual process. But let me kind of take what you're talking about and put it kind of in scientific terms. So our nervous system has two parts, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So the sympathetic is the energy part. So it lets me get up and work. It keeps me safe. It gives me energy to survive. But then I need the parasympathetic to come in and balance it, to rest, to heal, to rejuvenate. So get up in the morning, sympathetic kicks in. And if I feel safe, I can go to work and connect with people. Then I can come home, switch to parasympathetic and relax and do it all the next day. So we need those two to be in balance. What happens in complex trauma, as soon as there's danger, sympathetic kicks in 100%. Parasympathetic can't kick in at all because I'm in danger. I might get hurt. I need to be on guard. I need to be vigilant. I need to be fight, flight ready all the time. And so that's why people begin to burn out. They just go. Their body doesn't heal. Their body doesn't rest. It's going on cortisol, adrenaline, and that'll keep you going for 10, 20 years because your body's got great reservoirs of adrenaline and all of that to use. But you hit your 30s and all of a sudden you're burning out and you wonder why, and that's because they're out of balance. Now, the problem for people is they switch to healthy where they're in balance. Well, that feels boring. My normal is sympathetic going all the time. To take my sympathetic and turn it off and let my parasympathetic rest, that feels really dull, boring. And so what happens for many people is they begin to equate sympathetic to be, this is life, this is fun, this is where pleasure happens, this is where excitement happens. That's when I feel alive, so that's healthy. No, that burns you out. So the other piece to me that is so significant, in your sympathetic nervous system, you can experience almost all the emotions, all the painful emotions and pleasure, but you can't experience contentment and joy. Yeah. The only place to experience that is when you're in your parasympathetic. That's the only place your brain will experience contentment and joy, because that means I'm safe, all my needs are met, and I'm connected to safe people. That's why I'm in my parasympathetic. So I can relax, I can feel contentment and joy. So over here in sympathetic, I can be chasing joy and getting all of the emotions that are wonderful and great, except joy. And I'm burning myself out. But to go to a healthy balance feels boring. And so what it's important to realize for people is when I've been out of balance and I try to go to a healthy balance, it takes 3 to 6 months before that feels okay. It feels normal. And so I have to kind of just do the right thing, even though it's not delivering a whole bunch of pleasure for a while. But as I set up a healthy life, learn to meet my 12 needs, connect with people that are safe, have the balance between my sympathetic and parasympathetic, joy will gradually become part of my life. And it will grow as I get healthier. Does that make sense?
And yeah, absolutely. And just to really sit with the content, just the quote unquote boringness of life in this moment, whether it's you know, nothing really happening, like you said, like sitting in the parasympathetic state and just understanding that this is okay and this is the healthy place to be. You don't need to be gambling, or you don't need to be taking drugs or doing all these different things. This isn't real life. Being in the sympathetic state isn't real life. It's really the stillness and the calmness and the
Yeah.
Right.
So to me, what's so significant is when a person is in 100% sympathetic state, they're unable to attach to anybody in a secure way. They can have kind of barroom attachment, sports attachment. That's kind of fake attachment. It's superficial, but it's not real, heartfelt, safe, emotional connection. So you're sympathetic. If you're in it 100%, you can't connect. But where do the 4 good brain chemicals come from? Connection. And where do you connect? When you're in your parasympathetic. That's when you feel safe. That's when you connect. And so it's helping people realize you can do all kinds of activities, but if you never truly connect, you'll never get the stuff you're seeking for by all these activities. That connection piece is so important, but it's the scariest piece because that's where I got hurt. That's where I got let down. That's where I got judged. That's where I got rejected. And now you're saying that to get joy, I got to go back through connection. And what I say to people is a child in complex trauma concluded that you can never be safe in connection because you were trying to connect with unsafe people. So the difference now is not that you're trying to connect. The difference is you're now connecting with safe people, not unsafe people. And that's going to lead to a different outcome. So the issue wasn't connection. The issue was the people you were trying to connect with.
Is it unrealistic to say that a person can get to a complete state of contentment being in the parasympathetic state, or is there always going to be a moment of seeking that thrill, or whether it be gambling or taking drugs or alcohol? Is there, and is it okay if there is the occasional moment of I need a bit of a something to get me going.
Right.
But I know that it's not right, but I know I can get myself back to it.
Yep. Again, such a good question. So it's so important for people to realize is that they can get to a place of joy and pretty much stay there. But that doesn't mean it's lock solid, safe, I don't have to do anything. It's a very vulnerable place. And there's 2 things that make it very vulnerable that I could lose it. So number 1 is every time one of my, so we talk about, we have 12 needs. So we've got some physical needs, intellectual needs, emotional needs, relational needs, spiritual needs. So you put those together, we have 12 needs. If one of those isn't met, then I'm going to feel some emptiness. I'm going to feel some pain, a hunger, a thirst inside of me, which puts me in my limbic brain, which makes me go, I'm discontent. And I should be, because it's telling me I need to meet a need. So as long as I am keeping my needs met consistently, I will stay in a content state. As soon as I'm not meeting one of my needs, I will be in a discontent state. So content state is not a magical state that just comes at you. It's a state of all of your needs being met. And so to me, recovery for people is learning to meet their 12 needs in a healthy way consistently. That's the first step. But secondly is what makes that joy state vulnerable is my limbic brain can still get triggered. And when it gets triggered, it wants to go to an old set of tools. And that old set of tools could be, let's go get drunk, let's go get a girl, because that's where it thinks the solution to discontent is, let's go have some pleasure. And so everybody's going to get triggered. Everybody's going to have to deal with those things. That doesn't mean your joy will go away. It'll only go away if you give in to the trigger. So the trigger's not the bad thing. It's how I respond to the trigger that determines whether I keep the joy or I lose the joy. If I go back to old tools, I lose the joy. If I get back into my cortex and say, no, this is how I'm going to respond, this is healthy, the joy and contentment will be maintained. And so it's learning how to deal with those triggers that put me in my limbic brain, how to get out of that, back to my cortex, and use healthy tools, not the old unhealthy tools.
Right. And there's no magic pill, or there's nothing magical about this that someone can get to. and I remember you saying this on Theo's podcast, it's a matter of time. There's no way, and I was gonna ask you about this. There's no quick way to get to the parasympathetic state and the contentment quicker, before.
Well, there's definitely, so I would answer your question, Mo, on two levels.
Okay.
There are definitely some very practical tools that people can begin to use that are going to help very quickly. But also there's some deep work that's just very slow and gradual that is part of it. So a lot of people, sadly, just focus on the quick tools and hope it'll be good enough. And they really avoid that deeper, slower work. But if they don't do the deeper, slower work, the quick tools soon aren't going to help at all. So some of the quick tools, it's really... it's learning about yourself. It's learning to regulate your emotions, to ground yourself. It's learning to meditate. It's learning to do things that feed your limbic brain, your soul in positive ways. So nature, music. It's learning to connect with people and develop some healthy relationships where I can talk about real, deep, important life things.
Right.
It's learning very practical things about a daily routine that meets my 12 needs, daily structure that I need to keep myself safe, setting boundaries with toxic people, saying no to things that would put too much on my plate. So there's lots of real practical things that can bring increased improvement right away, but people got to work with that deeper, some of those wounds of abandonment and shame stuff and deep hurts and losses that they've gone through that they've just tried to stuff down. They got to somehow get through some of that.
Right.
And so you got to really work on two levels in this journey. The one's faster than the other, but the slower one is actually the more important one.
Absolutely. And it just sounds like such an impossible task, because it's something that's been piling up for so many years. And like you said, it's technically started at the nonverbal stage as an infant. So there's just so many years of, resolving and changing and someone can get to that. It's not impossible, you would say. Like it's
yes.
And to what percentage can someone resolve all this and work on their deeper rooted issues, and how much of it can they resolve? Is there always going to be a piece that's going to be there just because it is a part of the
Yep. Again, wonderful questions that you're asking. To me, a person can resolve trauma totally, but there's still scars. And so there's still... So I can go back and look at stuff that was done to me, and I've resolved it. It no longer triggers me. It no longer sends me in unhealthy behaviors. But if I think about it for very long, I still feel sadness. I still feel anger. Like it still has an effect on me. It shaped my life. Some of it now I'm actually thankful for because it shaped me in ways that gave me some skills that I now use in very positive ways. And so trauma does affect us and will always affect us. That doesn't mean it's not resolved. What's resolved is the painful elements that take me in unhealthy directions. That can be resolved, and that takes time. So the danger that I find with clients is when they hear that this is going to take a long time, what they think is, oh, they're saying it's going to be 10 years or 20 years. That means I'm not going to see any benefits for 20 years. So I got to work hard for 20 years without any benefits, and then I see my first benefit on my 20th year. And I go, no. You're going to start seeing benefits within a week, and you're just going to see more and more and more and more benefits as you go along, but you're going to keep working on it for 20 years until you really kind of feel yourself free of the negative side of a lot of this stuff. But you're going to be experiencing immediate benefits that are very positive that make it worth doing this journey. That's so important for people to keep in mind.
Right. And it's okay to tell that, your client that there will be a moment in time where there is a lapse of you fall back into that trap, because that does happen. You're not completely bulletproof from falling back into that trauma. It's not right.
Yeah. So if you were to look back in childhood, how does a child learn to ride a bike? Or how does a child learn to eat with a fork? Through multiple failure, through falling on their face, through dropping food. Like, every time they fail, their brain learns a new skill, a little bit of adjustment to get better at it until they're proficient at it. Because there's a lot of pieces to learning to ride a bike, to balancing, to coordination of muscles. There's a lot of pieces to getting that little pea on a fork up to your mouth without it falling off. You don't learn that skill set overnight, but if you practice it, you get better and better till you can do it in your sleep. And so the same is true with people when they're learning recovery. Is you're not going to be perfect on day one just because you learn academically what you should do. You're going to learn academically, but then by trial and error, and each time you fail, which is going to happen, you learn from it. Don't beat yourself up for it. Learn from it, because that's what children do. That's how we learn, and see it as a learning opportunity, not a beating up opportunity. And within a few months or so, you're going to actually become quite good at it. But the path to learn a new skill always involves failure, and that's okay. So with complex trauma, failure is always a bad thing. That's something that you fail, you get the pain of failing, but then you get punished for failing. You get laughed at for failing. You get pain heaped onto the pain of the failure. And so failure becomes a very bad thing to be avoided at all price. So that's why I got to be perfect. My first attempt is the thinking. And it's, no, failure actually is a good thing. Don't beat yourself up, just learn from it. And so you got to change how you look at failure. And so the danger with that, for an addict especially, is, oh, I failed. This is learning experience, so I can do it again. And now I give myself permission to relapse fully instead of just a slip, because I'm just learning. I'm back in university. So you got to be careful that you don't play that little mental gymnastics game of justifying failure to justify bad decisions, but to keep it as a learning experience.
Right. This has been an amazing talk, Tim, and I'm genuinely being real with you. This is probably my favorite episode that I have done, and I will wrap it up there because I don't want to take most of your time, and I think that this is the way you've explained everything is so simple but so effective at the same time. Like, as I'm listening to you, everything is clicking for me. Everything just makes sense. Like the dots are connecting, and I really, really appreciate you coming on and talking to me, Tim.
Oh, that's my pleasure. I've loved doing this with you, Mo, and glad it's helpful. So
absolutely. And
super. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim. I really, really appreciate it, honestly.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
All the best. Look forward to talking to you further.
Absolutely. We'll keep in touch.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And